I think the question that is on everyone's lips is the album title, "Caught with His Trousers Down." What does it mean? But it's quite simple and easy, really, to answer that, because literally it's a bit of me, a bit of my life. Because when I was young, I was growing up on films like 70s comedies, like those bawdy comedies, like the Carry On films and the Confession films. And I look back at my previous albums. I thought to myself, well, everything's been a bit depressing. Like I've had Dead and Gone, I've had Roller Coaster, which obviously trials the tribulations, the ups and downs of all sorts of things, which negativity is there again. And I thought, do you know what, this time, let's be positive. Let's have a little bit of a laugh. And it was basically just simply that, just to have a simple laugh and, take that title and make people think, this guy, loves his comedy. He's obviously playing around. He's having a joke. So the album came about around Christmas time, 2025, when just before Christmas, I got a notification from my record company who said to me, you need to contractually make another album. And at that point, I had nothing. And I was like, oh, well, if I must, I'll see what I can do, put it on the back burner. And then over Christmas, I had some friends over, and one of them was a music producer. And he said, have you thought about making any new music lately? So I've got this new technique. I said, oh, right, okay. So you get two microphones and you record simultaneously from different parts of the room. You can put the microphone in a bin, you can put it in a cupboard, and you get all this atmospheric kind of sound. I said, oh, it sounds great. He said, let's go to your studio and let's try it. So we went to my studio the day after Boxing Day, and we just mucked around with a song. And that song became the first song to come on the album, and that was Nothing Rhymed. At that point, there was no album made. There was nothing decided. It wasn't until a few weeks later he said to me, he called me and he went, look, that song was really good. What do you think of the technique? We had a little chat. I said, why don't you come to my place? He said, and we could start making the album, because I told him, contractually I needed to do one. I was a bit hesitant at first because I didn't really know if I had enough stuff, and my idea wasn't there at that time. So I took it down to the studio, and I kept visiting on and off and on and off. And after about 2 or 3 songs were in the can, I said, I think, predominantly I've made like a 70s album already. I said, so it will fit nicely with a title that I've got in my head. And using that title that I had, it became homage to the 1970s. It was, my way of saying, this is my decade that I love, and now I'm going to give a little bit back with a tongue-in-cheek title. And that's technically how the album came about. And eventually we ended up with about 15 songs. One of them couldn't make the album because it was a bit of a throwaway, something that was not from the 1970s as well, but it was good enough to record and use that new technique with. So yeah, it was pretty good for that. One of them, I didn't like the vocals, and as much mix as we did, it didn't fit the album very well, so that was left off. And there was a couple of others which never really finalised the mixing stage, because they just weren't good enough to be on the album. So yeah, I guess that's how it came about. And I had to then decide on the 2 singles. The first one was quite easy, Day After Day. There was no trouble about that. We knew when we were recording it that would be the single. The idea for the single was pretty simple. The lyrics state about looking out on your lonely gloom. So instantly I had this vision of this kind of water coming down this kind of window, the rain, splashed around. I managed to get to do some of the rain scenes in real rain whilst I was out and about. I jumped out the car and quickly grabbed onto the camera and done a quick few scenes in this torrential downpour that was happening. I got soaked, but it was worth it, because I achieved what the music video needed, and that was some real harsh rain. So the ideas for that was very, very simple. For the second video, that wasn't as easy because I didn't really know what the second single was going to be, and I didn't know what the whole premises was. But I got this brainwave that if I was maybe had this woman that I was interested in from the 1970s, so it's sort of like a past kind of and present kind of video, that I'm looking back on what we had, and that she inspired me to become a movie star. I didn't get the job, and in the end, I basically throw the picture away, and I've completely wiped her out of my mind because she didn't do anything good for me. And ironically, I set the picture alight. It's quite a bit brutal, really, in the sense of, you know, it isn't a happy love story, but it was a vision that came to me, and I thought it could work. It could actually potentially be quite funny. Yet again, I'm not taking things literally seriously. I'm just making this crazy music video. I think the album itself has been a great pleasure to record. 6 months in the making, and you see the final project finally come together. And you know, after all the retakes, all the re-recording, all the mixing, it's a long process, but I got there in the end. And when I got there, the result I am very happy with. Who knows, this time my trousers might actually be up.